Hey, it looks like there's one person here, so I'm just gonna keep going with this. Um, Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. We'll probably get started in earnest in a little while after a few more people show up. But yeah, sit back, relax, and let's surrender a vehicle. We've got 2 more minutes and then we'll get started. Feel free to just introduce yourself in the chat so I know who's here, whether you're from Western or not. Either way works. Currently, I'm just putting the line drawing together, um, and then I will get started explaining how I go about my rendering process. But this is just kind of like getting things um, all laid out at the moment, so we can get that started. Hey, Megan. Good to see you. How are things going in your neck of the woods? Yeah, I remember. How are things going? I hope you are in the mood to watch a render, because I'm just going to be sharing like my basic techniques for like basic shading, applying graphics, stuff hopefully that people can use for a lot of different things. But it works really well when you're designing some sort of vehicle with like sponsorship decals and paint jobs. Yeah, so hopefully it's something interesting. Right now I'm just sketching over the top of my loose sketch. So I had that guy over in the top corner. That's what I was aiming for initially, and I had a few ideas for what I wanted my perspective to look like. Once I found one that I liked, I sketched it out really loosely, like this, and then I dropped in a grid, which we've done. Hi, Sierra. Thanks for joining. Um, which I've done in a lot of my other uh, demonstrations. So basically what I'm doing now is just trying to clean up that early sketch, so when I render it, it doesn't look like I tried to finish something that didn't deserve to be finished. Because you got to bring the design up to a level that is worth, I feel like, taking to that next step. Um, Otherwise, it'll make the sketch feel really disjointed. It's like, I don't know, you wouldn't use a crayon to like draw like an architectural drawing necessarily. You know, you'd use the appropriate tool for the job. And I think it works the other way too. Like you wouldn't clean up a really, really loose sketch. You need to at least have something under your feet that you can stand on when you do this stuff. So I'm just trying to lay out a simple sketch here. That sounds cool. Movie posters are fun. They're very dramatic. You got to tell a lot of narrative in a single image. So I think they can be challenging in a good way for that reason. What's the concept for the poster? Oh, nice. That's cool. I think that's a really fun project, actually. You should look on what I was telling you to do before. Look at ArtStation because I feel like you get some really good inspiration from like how to like frame characters. And I would also look at like famous like movie posters, like the original Star Wars posters immediately jump to mind. Like they're just super iconic. I used to know the name of the artist that did a lot of movie posters, like the old style illustration ones. I can't remember what his name right now is though. But that used to be like a real craft, like doing huge matte paintings of a movie poster before they had like CGI and like computer graphics to do it for them. Okay, this next step is actually kind of a fun trick. So I have a round brush, and I'm going to turn off the transfer, and what I'm going to do is make tubes. Like I've got this roll cage, you know, that goes around this, and there's a way to do it that I can kind of cheat, so I don't have to draw it like every line of it. So all I have to do is put a stroke on this layer, and so anything I draw will be outlined in black. So this is a really great way to draw like tubes and things without actually having to draw both sides. And the other nice thing about it is that you can update it so it fits your sketch level. So like I want to do, yeah, like 5, let's say 4 pixels. I think that'll look good. But this has just been a really great way to do like tubes and wires when you're doing a line drawing in a really cheap and efficient way. And I forget who showed me this trick, but I use it a lot when I'm trying to do round like cages or something like that for a vehicle. It just saves a lot of time. And it's fun to use. The only downside is you can't overlap it. Like if you go over the top, it creates that issue, but as long as it's not overlapping, it's fine. And if you do need to overlap it, you can just start a new layer. So there are ways around it. So I think I just have to do this part, and then I think I'll have enough of a line drawing that I can get the render started. I'm going to do it slightly different than what I've done before, just to give you a little bit of diversity in approach. So if some of my previous stuff didn't really work for how you work, this might be a good chance for people to, I don't know, just learn a slightly adjusted rendering style, because there's not really any right way to do it. It's just what works for you and your personal preference. Let's see. So right now I'm just using my grid to line up my illustration to make sure that I'm not drawing out of perspective. That's the main benefit to using a grid like this. And so you can see I'm going to make another layer. I'm going to duplicate this effect. Where's that at? Copy layer style, paste layer style, and now I can do another one. So now you can see that it overlaps and there's no issue. Okay, I have my grid just so I can see what I'm doing. And now I'm just cutting away parts of it. that I don't need. And then we can get rendering. Okay, I think that should be enough for me to go off of, but I'm seeing a little bit of a perspective issue with that. And then the last pipe up front still needs to be cut off here. There we go. Now we've got easy pipes that I made without taking really any time at all to do. Okay, and I can flip my perspective to make sure everything's still working, and I'm still relatively happy with it, which I am. Now we will get started. Okay, so I collapse all my line layers so I can start to use the lasso tool and start blocking in colors. So this is another really cheap way to just start filling in things. It's basically like treating your illustration like a coloring book, which is a really easy way to think about it because this way it doesn't have to be intimidating. I'm also making my line layer a multiply layer because there was some white in that. And I'm seeing that I've got a lot of gaps here, so I'm just going to go in with a brush real quick and fill in those gaps. So when you use a, what's it called, a magic wand tool in Photoshop, it fills in any contiguous pixel group. So if you imagine like this space right here, that's all one group because it's outlined with a black line. And then any gap like right here on the fender, it's going to fill it in. So you just got to make sure that you've got basically everything wrapped up in a good outline. See, I've got another gap here, one up front. Actually, I might leave that one. Yeah, I think that's all of them. So I'm just going to try this again. Invert my selection. Oh, I still got holes. That's all right. I'll just fill these in. Oh, I'm good. I'm glad you found ArtStation. Yeah, that's a good idea to go off of Endgame. I remember they had really good posters too. I would also say like look at some more like classic posters because I think that like some of the like compositions from a classic movie poster are what like modern posters draw from. You know what I mean? It's like it helps to understand like where the whole art of creating a movie poster came from, and it might give you like some insights that you wouldn't have had if you just looked at only modern movie posters. But that's just a hunch. I don't know if that's a real thing or not. But yeah, that's a really cool idea, actually. Okay, so I've got everything isolated, and usually this is where I go in and start doing my shading. So that's also like playing with the brightness, basically the value. But what I'm going to do this time is how I've been working lately, and that's by basically color blocking up front. And so I'm going to block in all the different materials to begin with. So all my dark, like the dark rubberized tread on the tires, these fenders are going to be dark. I'm going to use that guy up there as reference because I like the spirit of that sketch, and I just want to take it to a slightly more refined place. So you can color these spaces in, or you can pick it with the lasso tool, which I'm doing now, which is a little bit more efficient. And I'm just color blocking in all of these little areas. We've got the front windows. I think this is like a manned vehicle. It's like when I did this initial sketch, it was for Inktober, and if you've looked at any of my portfolio, a lot of it's influenced by like military vehicles and race cars, stuff like that. And so this is like kind of used to be a military vehicle, but now, just the way it's moving, it feels very racy and fast to me. So I'm not really sure what it is, but in this sketch, what I'm going to do is treat it like a desert racer. So that's going to influence a lot of my. Okay, so see what I did here? It looks like I'm just kind of coloring over the lines, but if you are using Photoshop and you want another nifty trick, you can hold down Alt if you're using a PC, and you can nest layers on top of themselves. And so all of these color layers go on top of the gray. So wherever I have gray pixels on that bottom layer, these all get sandwiched on top. And you can, so right now the white is on top of the black, and you can shift them. So now the black is on top of the white, and that's why that disappears. But it's a really efficient way to stack color and isolate different components, because another thing that Photoshop and really digitally sketching in general allows you to do that more traditional mediums don't allow you to do is to change the order in which you're applying, I guess, paint to the canvas, basically. So if you were actually painting something in real life, you would have to start generally in the back, like if you're painting a landscape, get the back in there, and then start to layer on top of that. And if you make a decision midway through that you want to change something, you basically have to start over. Whereas Photoshop, if you take your time and you're really deliberate about how you lay everything out, you can actually adjust things on the fly in a much more controlled way, which is a really nice way to work, honestly. Okay, I think that's basically it for my general color blocking. So I guess the last thing I'm going to do is actually the paint layer, which I really still like this kind of yellowy orange thing. And I'm working on a personal project on the side right now that I'm actually going to use this as a little bit of a test bed for a paint scheme. So kind of two birds with one stone. That's what I'm aiming for. So yeah, there we go. And if you get rid of the line, you can see that, it looks like a thing, and that didn't take a lot of time at all. The things I'm looking at right now are like proportions and just the general dynamic nature of this. I have a tendency to make everything feel very same in terms of proportion, and like even looking at this, there's a decent amount of like, I don't know, it feels a little too balanced to me. I think it might be too late for what, yeah, I'm not going to get into it, but if I had time, I would take this whole section and move it back to like here. And so the front would be a lot longer and the back would be a little bit fatter here. But that is for another time. I'm also going to give myself a background here just so I have something to work against. I like some of the colors that are happening in this little sketch up here, so I'm just going to keep pulling from there. And I lost him because, again, the layer was over here. I'm going to shrink that up just a little bit. There we go. Okay, so I've got all my color blocks happening here. So the nice thing about this is that I can paint each of these independently of one another. So I'm going to select only the yellow areas. I'm going to hide my selection so I'm not distracted. And now I can just start to isolate parts of this vehicle that I want to shade. If anybody has watched any of my previous rendering tutorials, I always start with the shadows first, and I need to think about what kind of lighting situation I want. Actually, here, I'm going to sketch that out real quick. So kind of what I'm thinking, just looking at this and thinking about like making a desert vehicle, my first thought is that I want really direct hard lights, and so I'm going to have the light come in, I think from the top. It's generally the direction that you're viewing it. It wouldn't make a lot of sense to light it from the back because this whole face would then be dark. So just in general, you light what you're looking at, and so I want to highlight the side area here because I think that's the most interesting part of what we're doing. And so I'm going to have a real hard light coming mostly from the top, like if it was like in the middle of the day, and that's going to come down, and the top will be the most light, and the side will be second most, and this front end here is going to be the darkest. So now that I have that in my head, I can start dropping in kind of my basic values. So I'm going to start on the side because it's a good idea to start like kind of in the middle. sometimes I start from the darkest area, which also has its benefits, but I don't know. I just feel like starting in the middle right now. And I'm going to bring my opacity for this layer down a bit. And I'm going to add some blue to the shadow, not a lot, just a little bit of saturation, and then bring that down. So what I'm doing now is just using a super soft brush, and I'm using it on a low opacity, and I added a little bit of blue, and I already like the way that's looking. So the reason I added a little blue is just because it's a little more realistic, and it also, I think, will add a decent amount of value to the overall rendering, just because, I don't know, I've talked about color before, and, you know, true black and true white don't really exist in the real world. Even if you're looking at a black car, generally when you're looking at it, you're seeing all the things it's reflecting, like that shininess in that black has blues and browns, like a whole world of color that, you know, your brain just kind of acknowledges and doesn't really have to deal with. But as an artist, you need to understand like where those things are happening, because then you can control them. I'm actually going to bring this up on top. So I was going to do each piece individually. I think that'll come into play in a little bit later. But right now, I want to affect everything that I'm working on. So I'm kind of ignoring, you'll notice, the bars at the moment, because they're very complicated in their shape, and they're going to cast a lot of weird shadows. And so I don't really want to deal with that right now. All I'm doing right now is concentrating on the big shapes. So everything that's kind of facing us gets this kind of halfway tone, and then you can see that I'm starting to cast some pretty big shadows from these vents on the sides. So I'm already like dealing with my light source. This can seem a little bit confusing, I would imagine, if you're seeing this for the first time, but basically each of these shapes that I'm making for these shadows are based on my understanding in my head of where the light source is coming from, mixed with how I know that that light will affect each of these panels of the vehicle and then cast it onto another one. So I'm basically in my head just taking a string and going from the line of all these edges and bringing it down onto the surface below it to make these shadows seem believable. And it's also pretty easy on this vehicle because there's so many just flat planes. So each plane is kind of its own, like each plane is going to have slightly more or less light on it. There's not a lot of soft transitions. And so I can do this pretty easily without having to think over all of my decisions, which is nice. So that one I think would be pretty dark just because it's so far away from where I'm deciding that the light source is. Does anybody have any questions about anything that I'm doing yet? Okay, so and you can see like I'm going to take the bars and just move them on top. So there, immediately that fixes that issue. Yeah, I'm liking the way this is going so far. And you can even see like if we take the, where's my line work? There it is. I don't know what this layer is. Delete it. So if you take your line work off, it's already kind of starting to feel correct, just with a strong light source. This is also a fun little trick that I use. It doesn't work all the time, but basically what I did was I took that gray layer that this is on top of, and I merged it down, and so I'm making a faux shadow out of the shape that I had made earlier. And the nice thing about this is that you can get details like all these weird edges and lines from your drawing, and you just have to toy with it a little bit to get it to look like it fits the light direction. And so in this case, I think that worked out pretty well, actually. There are obviously some issues, like up here in the front, I think that shape is pretty off for what the real shadow would be doing. And so all I have to do now is just go back in and fill in, different brush, and fill in these areas. So it's just using you know, a transform tool basically to make up a shadow, and I'm also going to fill in some spaces. There's a weird tangent happening right there that I didn't like, and so I just added a little bit of shadow to it. I'm also going to do it in the back there because I like the way it's surrounding this shape. Yeah, I feel good about that. I think it makes sense visually, and all the lines are going in the right direction with the light source. So, yeah, I think that turned out okay. I'm going to bring this guy back because I might need that for later. Okay, so my main lighting direction is working. I'm seeing a few areas that are not fully fleshed out yet for the shadows. So this whole front end slopes down, so this is all going to need to be slightly darker. And opacity 62. I need to get, so this is a little tricky because I had that black color, and I'm just going to guess it's down here in the tire because I've been color picking a lot, so that original color I had is gone, but I can get approximately close to it. So I'm just darkening that up a little bit. Yeah, that feels about right. I'm also seeing I want some cast shadows on this piece here because these two like pylon things on the side, these vents, have a little gap in between them, and I just want to make sure that that comes through. Yeah, there you go. The next thing that's kind of bugging me right now as I'm looking at this is the tires down here are really getting washed out. So I want to, I think, erase away some things from the shadow layer. I'm going to just use a soft brush for this. And it will look like I'm painting in light, but really all I'm doing is erasing the shadows away. So it's just a question of contrast. I might not need actually to paint too much light into this if the shadows are telling enough of a story, but I won't know that until I go in and do this. The other reason I'm taking this out is because if I started to add lights on top of color that I had already shaded, it's starting to pile up pixels in that case, and I think that that can start to get really sloppy really easily. And so I'm just trying to go back and clean up a little bit of my work here real quick. Because once you start layering stuff, especially digitally, your work can get really muddy really quickly, and that's an issue that I have often, actually. And since I have this color, so you can see that this whole section of the these bars are not shaded yet. So, you know, I actually have a little trick I think I can do with these too. So again, I'm going to put a quick filter because some shapes, like a cylinder, you can actually fake by using filters. So this is another nice little trick I picked up over time. So if you go to Bevel and Emboss and you change your technique to smooth, you can actually make this, so I'm turning up soften really high. I want the size to be big enough that right in the middle it makes a line, and you can even change where the light source is coming. So I can make this light source fit with what I've drawn up here, and that dark is way too dark, and I can play with it here. So you can see that it's already starting to like render itself for me, which is really nice. Hey, Isaac, good to see you, man. How are things going for you? Are you working on any projects for school or personal stuff? If you're just joining us, I've got a race vehicle I'm working on here, so feel free to chime in with any questions or anything, comments you might have. Yeah, so you can see it's not perfect, but if I turn it on and off, you can see that like from far away, it looks like it's already been shaded up. All I have to do is just paint on top of it now. So right now, my wand tool is set to contiguous, which is a command up here, and that means it just picks one, but if you turn that off, it picks all of those pixels that are that color on the whole layer. So that's how you can pick all of them at once without having to go in and pick stuff individually. So I'm really going to darken up this front one first, because this would definitely be in shadow. Again, I'm still just using a really soft brush, because I need to just block in some values. And these gradients are what are going to sell this vehicle as being realistically lit, because that's the other thing about light, is that it always falls off from darkness to light, and there's just always a lot of gradients and transitions, and so it's important to try to stick to those. And the easiest way to do that is by using a soft brush, because there's just inherently a lot of, I don't know, just give and take with a soft brush. Like, you don't have to be too careful with what you're doing, and you can also make a lot of mistakes that you can clean up later, but it leaves a lot of visual language for you to pick up on later. The other thing about a cylinder is that to make it look round, you want to add a little bit of a rim light. So on all these lower edges, because this material is relatively shiny, I'm just lighting up the bottom just a little bit. You know, I'm also going to knock down my line drawing, because it's starting to get really distracting to me how dark those lines are. And I haven't decided if I want to keep them in the end or not, but I'll knock it down a little bit just so it's not so distracting. So the other thing I'm doing right now is just smoothing out some of these shapes, because that filter is not perfect, and it's created a lot of like weird artifacts in some areas, but I would rather just have to clean something up than do it from scratch, which is what I would have had to do if I didn't do this tool. So I'm just following along with the lines I already did, and just making sure everything feels like round and soft. And balanced too. Like, I just try to smooth out some of these lines, because there's a lot of like weird, dinky, like especially here in the back. I'm just color picking and then painting it back in. You know, once your lights and darks are defined, you can just keep picking over and over, like the shadow and then the light, and the shadow and then the light. And you don't have to like figure out, is this exactly the same gray I was using before. And this also helps keep your work consistent, instead of like picking what you think is the right like shadow color every time. It's a lot safer to pick from your shadow right there in front of you on the screen, and it will keep things looking consistent. That's awesome, Isaac. I'm glad you're staying busy. Yeah, okay, so that's looking pretty decent to me. I think the tires need some work now, because I don't know, they're just feeling very dark in comparison to the rest of this. So I think I'm going to, well, for one, I think I'm going to paint from this direction for a little while, because I like just flipping the canvas often, because I feel like it keeps the painting feeling fresh to me, and I won't get bored as quickly. Excuse me. I'm also going to put a cast shadow on this front piece, because it's looking really distracting to me. Shadows are another way to show form. You can see right here, I curved it over the edge of that, and that's hopefully to show that shape. Yeah, that feels better. So now you can see that the shape of this is being reinforced over and over. Just rounding that out a little bit more, and then same thing here. Because this is a cylindrical shape, that should come in. Okay, so I think what I might do here is just lighten up these tires a little bit. Yeah, that feels better. Let's see what I did for the wheels here. Yeah, I like that I've got yellow being repeated in the wheels down there. I think I'm going to do that quickly in here. So what I'm going to do for this is I already created ellipses that I used this grid to make, and so I'm going to hang on to them and see if I can make some quick wheels here. And because this perspective is fairly soft, by that I mean it's not like a really wide angle where all these ellipses are very, very different from one another. It's actually pretty simple. And I think if I just do one wheel, I'll be able to actually duplicate it 2 more times and save myself, again, a little bit of work. So because this outer ellipse is correct or good enough for now, I can keep using it over and over to make the wheel from this tire. And so I'm just trying to think about how many layers and drops down I want it to have. I want this to be like a flat military style wheel, like on a big truck, and those generally have a lot of bolts all over them because they have to hold like a really heavy tire in place, and so that means like a lot of bolts and flat planes. They don't have normal looking wheels because a normal wheel wouldn't be able to hold all that weight. So this is another one of those times when like knowing a little bit about what your subject matter is, like how it's made, can send a message to people without them even realizing it. So hopefully looking at these wheels, they'll be like big, tough looking wheels that people will see and say like, oh yeah, it obviously belongs in a truck and not like a, you know, a Prius or something. So I'm just going to sketch in real quick those bolts I was talking about. And again, actually I'm going to try to be smart about this. So I'll draw one bolt and then just duplicate it over and over again. So by holding down Alt, you can copy and paste and just duplicate this over and over again. And I'm just trying to be like careful of my perspective to make sure everything is working. And from far away, I think that sells it. Yeah, so there you go. Now I've got a wheel, and now all I have to do is transform it a few times and make sure it fits the other one. So it's not going to be exact, but you know, there are some things if you're just like, if you're aware of what your priorities are in a rendering, you can kind of take some shortcuts. And so what I'm doing now is that one of the things that will change as this moves back in perspective is the wheels will actually appear deeper as they go back. And so I'm just slightly modifying it so it feels a little bit more correct in perspective. And these two are so similar that I don't think I'll have to do that on this one. I'll just get it centered on the tire face, and I think we should be okay. Yeah, I mean, there are some small perspective issues for sure with those wheels being duplicated like that, but not to the point for this kind of illustration that I think it matters. Okay, so I'm going to pick the yellow layer because that's where I'm going to be painting this stuff in, and I'm just color picking from the body color because I want it to be the same yellow. And then here, I'm trying to figure out where I want the wheel to start. I think that ellipse. So I just need to duplicate that on these two. And I think I should be able to, oh. So now I can just fill, right? Why can't I do that? Oh, I see. There we go. That's because the layers are on top of each other. So my dark layer, which is the tire material, is on top of the yellow. So I have to make a new yellow layer, and I can just pick on the inside of those now, and then do it again. Yeah, I think that's a nice balance of color. I am a little worried that making that color choice has highlighted more of those perspective issues I was talking about before, but again, I think it's one of those things I'm just going to look the other way about for now. I am going to take out this interior because I want that to be dark just for a little more variety. Yeah, I think that feels more balanced. And it looks more like my illustration at the beginning, which is good. Okay, what to do next? I feel like the lighting is working pretty well. Let me see, let me just find a desert racing truck for reference. I'm going to do a quick Google search. And actually, I found a pretty good one. It's going to be another reference image for me to use. And hopefully this will give me some ideas for what is working in my illustration and what's not. So right here, I really like how dark the shadows are, and so it makes me reconsider the lower shadow, like making that darker. Yeah, I think that was the right choice. And then also, let's see if like darkening up my shadow layer helps. Like, yeah, I do think that that added contrast is kind of nice. So, you know, just picking up reference that's appropriate for your project is, you know, very helpful. Seeing these lights is kind of nice, and I'm also seeing these bright white highlights. I think maybe I should bring in a little bit of some lights in here. I think I'll do that now. Okay, so I've basically done shadows so far. So now I'm going to pick some areas to do a little bit of lighting. So like I said before, it's not great to pick pure white and pure black. So I'm going to try something like this. So this has a little bit of blue in it, so I'm imagining this like being a really bright day. And even though the light that comes from the sun is, you know, very warm and yellow a lot of the time, the ambient like kind of color in the environment also plays into your lighting decision. So I'm going to add just a little bit of blue to some of these. Oh, you know what? I'm missing a really simple area. The shadow that this bar casts on everything else is very apparently missing to me. So I'm going to try that same little trick I did for the lower portion of this vehicle. Let's see if this works. This might be a little confusing because I just picked a really complicated shape. Okay, so I think it's going to work in some areas but not others. So it needs to be slightly below and forward for this to read correctly. And there's some areas that are working, like over here on the side. I think that's really working, but in the back, obviously, we've got some issues. So first thing I'm going to do is erase away everything that's not working. I think part of this on the back will actually show, so I'm going to leave that. That's actually working for me there. Let's see, what color is this? I'm just going to color pick it, and I'll take it back down. If I color picked it right now, it would pick this yellowy color, which is what the shadow is creating when it mixes with the yellow underneath it, but that is not actually the color I'm painting in. That can get you confused for a really long time. So being aware of what you're color picking is also super important because it's really easy to pick a color that doesn't exist. Because right now this shadow is black blue on top of yellow, and it's giving me this kind of brown color. But I don't know actually what that brown color is on its own, so you can't you can't just go around picking that because it would make some weird, funky colors if I then tried to paint that on top of everything else. So I really like that part. I think that's working, but it's obviously too thick, so I need to erase parts away. Same thing for down here. Just erasing a little bit of that away. On the side, that's working all right, but I just need to get rid of all these extra parts. And I think it would come across the top just a little bit. And then, same way I was showing form before, this surface rolls over, and so the shadow needs to follow that. Okay, this one needs to connect, obviously, because the shadow would start where that touches the body of the vehicle. Same thing down here. That actually looks okay. This one's going to need some work. Could be something like that. Yeah, that feels better. See, now it seems like that outer bar shape is now actually on top of the body because you can see all these cast shadows happening, which helps. I'm going to add in some noise to the background because it's kind of bothering me how just plain it is. So I'm just adding in a little bit of noise, like if this was like sand or something. And then I also want to paint on top of that just some shadows that are working with it. Working with the lighting source, that is. So I'm just kind of filling in some areas like that. And put that on a multiply layer. Let me bring the opacity down again. I just want like some gradation so you can see that the light is brighter in one area than another. And that will again help sell my lighting story. Okay, what is next? I'm going to continue to lose my line drawing as I go because I don't know. I like the way this rendering is going without needing the line. Sometimes I leave the line drawing in because it like fills in some of the blanks in my rendering. But here, this is reading pretty well, so I think that I can get away with actually losing it. Okay, so all these layers that I have so far have been kind of like building on top of each other. But now that I'm pretty happy with everything, what I'm going to do now is actually just start to clean up some of these edges and color pick areas that are working. So all of these like kind of chamfered edges would be slightly lighter colored, like all these high points in the design. Because any hard edge is going to have a little bit more light on it. So this is also a chance for me to go in and clean up all of these kind of messier areas where my shadows get a little bit lost. And this is just going to further help the viewer understand what all these forms are doing. So a lot of these are just helping to reinforce that idea. So this shadow, I'm realizing, has some issues, and so I'm just kind of adjusting it. And now I can pick the shadow with a color picker without having to worry about it because I'm not creating anything new. I'm just cleaning up what's already there. I think what I might end up doing is going back in and darkening in this area. so it's actually a different material. Because I want these to be like engine intakes or something, so any area that has like a specific function, I'd really like to call out if I can. So that highlight was too bright for the fact that it was still in shadow. So you have to like remember what your hierarchy is. Like even though it gets lighter on these edges, the lightest edge in shadow is still going to be darker than everywhere else in the vehicle. So I'm just doing a little bit like that to help the form sit out from the shadow that I've created. And also, where the forms are close to each other, we talked about ambient occlusion, which is a fancy word for shadows that are cast from an object onto itself. And so the ambient occlusion happens wherever two parts of this object are close to one another. So there's going to be extra shadows in all of those areas where two surfaces come together. So right there, in here, this is all ambient occlusion happening. I actually think I want to make a shadow back here because this pylon or this vent, whatever it is going to cast a shadow that I just want to be on the top of the vehicle just a little bit right there. And while I'm on top of this truck, I can see that I did a bad job of lassoing in this area, so now I can clean this upper part of the cage up. I'm just following the line drawing still, so this is a lot like just playing a color by numbers game. There's no wrong answer. You just have to work your way down from the big shapes and get progressively smaller and smaller, more detailed, and at the end you'll have something, worth hanging on to, or at least something you learned something from. Even if it's not a piece that you're comfortable sharing at the end of a rendering session, I'm sure if you do it deliberately enough, you'll be able to at least walk away and say that, I wasn't thrilled with how it turned out, but, I learned something about it, and I think I know what I'll do differently next time. While I'm doing this, I might get a little quiet just because I'm thinking about some of these aspects that I'm trying to paint in. What are you guys working on that you might have questions about? Do you have any questions about what you're working on, whether it's digital rendering or otherwise? It could be just straight up design related. If anybody has any questions about that stuff, I'd be more than happy to help out. I know most of the people watching this right now are from Western, so if you guys have any questions about art classes, getting a job in the design industry, anything like that, feel free to just toss it out there, because this is, your time, so make the most of it. So this area that I'm picking right now is just supposed to be the brightest area on the vehicle because it's facing most directly the lighting source, and so I just want to bring a little bit more light in here. The shadows in the back got too dark because of all the layering on top of each other that I kept doing. Hey, what's up, Mikey? Yeah, this is like a Warthog successor. Master Chief could drive this around. Didn't you suggest Master Chief? I think that's why I just thought of that. Did you get a chance to play with the bubble maker we bought your daughter? So I'm seeing a weird little, this weird little creature over here in the shadow. It's just something I picked accidentally. I'm also seeing that this bar in the back is way too light for what I'm drawing, so I need to definitely paint in a shadow over the top of it. Good, I'm glad to hear it. You need some toys that aren't video games. I think this shadow up front is too dark too. I think I just layered too many on top of each other, and if you keep layering shadows that are on a multiply layer, they just keep adding dark in over and over and over again, so it's really easy to get too dark. That seems like a design flaw. Are you sure you just didn't put it in the wrong way or too tight? This feels like a Mikey issue. So I'm just trying to smooth out some of these shadows up front. This is also a chance for me to bring some artificial lighting into the illustration because since the front is covered in shadow, and you can see like, oh, where'd my reference go? You can see up here I've got headlights and like some kind of grill, so I want to make sure that those come back in. So now that I'm just painting on top of everything, that's going to come back in on this layer too, I think. Oh, and here's another little trick that I like to use. So what I'm going to do is actually design the headlight in a front-facing view, and then apply it with a simple transform selection. I think that's what it looks like, right? Yeah. Too many dots. I don't need that one. So these circles are going to become my headlight, and I'll show you in just a sec. So now I can paint on the inside, so like I'm just imagining like some kind of high-tech LED. Doesn't need to be amazing or anything. Again, just doing like the broad strokes, because this is not going to be a super obvious part of the design, so I don't have to be too careful or precious about what I'm doing. Okay, so there's our headlights. I'm going to make two because it's got two headlights. Isaac, I'd buy one now if I were you. I know you've still got like a decent amount of like learning just in terms of like general sketching technique, but I think it's a good idea to start sketching digitally as soon as you can. I think the trick is just to limit yourself in terms of what you try to do digitally. Like you shouldn't be trying to do, like say if you're a freshman, you shouldn't be trying to do these levels of renderings that I'm just doing, because like there's so many other tools that I'm using at once besides just like digital sketching tools. So like if you start sketching digitally, use SketchUp or just use the brush tool in Photoshop and get really good at that, because you don't want to learn too much too fast, because I think it will actually slow your pace of learning to overwhelm yourself. So see, I just sketch those out, put them in perspective, and now I can actually going to darken them a little bit because they're in shadow, but yeah, they're there. You can see them. So I'm decently happy with that. Yeah, and Isaac, just get a... It's hard for me to say if you should get one that's like a standard Wacom one that you draw on that and then you see it on screen, or if you get one that's like what I have, which is a Cintiq. That's a screen that you actually draw on. I would try both, and if one is way better to you, then do that. I think that's more of like a preference thing, for different artists. Have you used both before? Okay, I've got those headlights done. I'm just going to keep painting onto the vehicle. These revision lines. I just don't want any one part of this truck to feel more finished than another. So as I do one area of it and feel good about it, then I have to go in to the next area and start adjusting that because I start to notice things that are standing out to me because they look unfinished. And so it's a balancing act really. About always making the whole thing move at the same pace because I can only paint one part of this at a time, and I don't want to take any one part too far because that's going to make catching up in other areas much more difficult than it needs to be. Yeah, in that case, Isaac, I would, find a refurbished one, like go on Amazon. I'm pretty sure they sell refurbished ones that are going to be quite a bit less than a brand new one. And like, feel free to get one that's not like Wacom based. I like read reviews and just Google like best budget drawing tablet. A buddy of mine is always showing me like ones that he finds from like God, what's the Chinese version of eBay called? Is it Huawei? I think it might be Huawei. Anyways, there are a lot of like Chinese and Korean tablets out there that are like really, really nice, but they are cheaper because like everybody thinks that Wacom is the only game in town. And I think you could get a really good drawing tablet for much less than like a traditional Wacom tablet. It might have a little bit less functionality, but like right now where you're at in your, you know, creative journey, like it's it's a little bit overkill. You don't want to be that kid who's got like $3,000 camera because like he could afford it or his parents bought it for him, but like doesn't know how to use it. You know, like just you don't need tools that are too advanced for you. You have to like work your way up. It's like, you know, learning to walk before you can run. I'm actually going to start painting on top of my line drawing. That's why I just made that extra layer because I want to start being able to fill in areas like this. So it's no longer nested, and so I'm painting this more like I would, um, a traditional illustration. I have some indication of tire treads too. Tires are kind of a funny thing to render because they seem very matte, but if you ever look at tires on like a vehicle, especially if they've just been washed, tires are actually really shiny. And so it's important to like sell that part of the story too. I'm not going to do too much for these because, already you can see how complicated treads can get. I just wanted to get a little bit of indication in there on at least one of them. Yeah, man, just don't stress about it. Like it's something that's important to learn, but it's not gonna make or break your career. Um, I had just a standard Wacom that didn't have a screen on it until I think 2015 maybe. Like, and before that I was just drawing directly on the pad, and then I was just staring at my computer screen because that's where the changes were happening. So it was like, a pretty steep learning curve to start looking at what I was drawing again. But, once I did, that became my preferred method. But, I think everybody's got to figure it out for themselves. I'm not ready to lose the line from everywhere, so I need to keep track of where that is. So I just named it real quick. So what I'm painting now is just, if I'm saying that this is a super brightly lit scene, anything that's facing down into the ground is also going to get bounce light from the ground, the sand in this case. So I want to make sure that that's pretty obvious. Yeah, I think that's looking pretty good. You can see how much just cleaning up these edges has affected the drawing. It's like all those weird little like nitpicky kind of crinkly edges, like that stuff just needs to be smoothed over. And then you can get back to the important stuff. Okay, I'm getting close to being done with this part of it because I want to also show you how I drop in graphics and stuff. So you can see this thing's got a lot of part lines and like little decals, and I want to play that up because I think this is something else that's like just really nice to have, you know, an understanding of when you're working on digital illustration. So I've got this fun hazmat stuff. Got a decal sheet that I got online. Let's see what else I have here. Yeah, okay. And I've got some just companies. So let's see. I've got this whole list of companies here. I think these are all like tech companies. I just tried to pick stuff that I think would like sponsor, you know, like a weird vehicle like this to race. This kind of feels like a game thing. So if I could find something, CEA, NVIDIA, Asus, Atari, that could be a good one. I'm trying to find one that will work with the design of the vehicle too. Not seeing anything that's like really jumping out at me here. Maybe I'll come back to that. Let's see what we're looking at on this one. Yeah, this has got a lot of like automotive stuff on here, so this will be good. So I'm just gonna go in and cut out some of these that I like. You know, I really like this Alpine logo. Maybe that's what we'll do. Definitely gonna use it. So Alpine, HKS. So right now I'm just picking stuff that is automotive related, but I think is also gonna look good on this vehicle and not look out of place. So I have to pick things that like conceivably a racing truck would have. Let's see. I like that I have all these drink things on here, but I don't know which one would be best. Let's come up here. I'll grab InGen. That looks kind of cool looking. I always want to do Red Bull, but that's kind of a cop-out. I need to avoid doing that every time. Arai, I really like these helmets, so I'm going to grab this one. This Valvoline logo is kind of nice. So the one issue that I'm seeing, actually I like this mobile one better. The one issue I'm seeing is that my my image that I'm referencing here is pretty low resolution, so I'm going to run into some issues, but hopefully I can find a way around it. Just issues with up-resing these things because they're going to look fuzzy if I get them too big. You know, I had a race car that I was actually looking at earlier when I was thinking about what I would do for this. Let's see what kind of like things that they have. Like this guy is pretty cool looking. So, okay, another thing I need is to make a race number. That'll actually be pretty good because that's going to take up a lot of space. So let's do that and put a paint job on here, and then hopefully I have a little bit of a inspiration. Okay, I think I have enough little, okay, I'm going to collect these all on the left so I don't lose them. They're just kind of scattered about right now. Use all those. I really want to use this like caution stuff on something, but I'm not sure what. I think maybe like the bars or something, or areas where it gets hot. don't know, I just want to use that somewhere. I just think that's cool looking. Okay, I need to make a race number. Today's the 6th, so I'm just going to go ahead and make it number 6. There's not really any rhyme or reason for it. I just feel like I need a number. So we'll do 6. I'm also going to put my name on it so no one steals this later. I'm going to pretend like I'm driving this thing. That 6 actually isn't bad. You have to pick a one that looks like it would be a racing car number. That looks like an Old West thing, so that's not going to work. You got to get really smart about your choices for fonts because that's also part of the design. So I'm not really great with graphic design, but I know well enough like the kind of graphic design that would go along with you know, some kind of race car. I'm not going to pick like Arial or like some kind of cursive script for this, just because it would feel very out of place. Actually, that one's pretty good. I like this 6, but I'm going to see if I can just mess with it a little bit because I want it to be a little bit thicker. Let's do 66. Those look good together. Okay, so we got that. We got my name underneath. And then below both of those, I'm going to make a quick box. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I think what I might do is just give myself a little bit of a... I don't know, does that look silly with that cut off? I don't know, I think that looks kind of good. Like a little bit offset. Yeah, that looks good. So I'm going to merge all these together. I've got that. What else? Like looking at this, I'm just trying to think of anything else that I'm missing. I think the next thing to do is like figure out what the paint job looks like. This obviously doesn't have anything going on paint-wise, but looking at this, it's got these two big structures down the side, these big vents. So I think that's a decent place to start a paint job. So what I'm going to do is just kind of rough it in and follow the shape of the vehicle. And that makes sense because like in that race car I just showed you, like you can see this black follows the shape of what's already happening there. So all of the decisions I make on how the paint job fits with this vehicle needs to follow the design of the vehicle. Like I don't want to just draw some random shape on the side because that would feel, I think, really disconnected. And then doing this is also going to allow me to make this line like disappear into that vent, which I think would be kind of cool. So I think I'm just going to do like a really dark color, like basically a black. This right there, yeah, right there. Yeah, I think that'll work. Yeah, I think something like that could be cool. And then it will continue up here. Onto the back of the vehicle. Yeah, I think that could be cool. I also like the stripes, how they disappear on here. So I think I'm going to try to recreate that. I don't know if going that way or that way makes more sense. I think this way probably makes the most sense. So I'll start skinny and then just slightly thicker as it goes back. I think that's working. Let's see if I can just steal this and duplicate it on the other side. I'm already seeing an issue. I can't duplicate it because these lines aren't going to work. Okay, well, I tried. So I'm just going to sketch on the other side. Same thing I did before, just following the shape of the vehicle to get these lines to drop in. Now this part is the tricky part, is I might actually bring my grid back in so I can kind of eyeball where these lines are going to be, because they're disappearing in space, but they're also at this weird angle. So it's going to be really easy for me to mess this up. Yeah, that one's too close. I'm just trying to see, like follow different parts of the vehicle that I can reference. It's looking okay. Actually, it's not. There's some issues I'm seeing. So the angle's got to be more severe, I think. Yeah, I think that makes more sense. Yeah, that's better. Yeah, there we go. And then I think I will just do one in the front like that. Okay, so right now it's on a multiply layer, which means that it's allowing some of the stuff underneath to show through, but it's also allowing the yellow to show through. So I'm just going to bring it down here and change that to a color layer. And you can see that knocks the yellow right out of it. And now that I've done the stripe shape, it's actually already doing kind of what I wanted this decal to do, so I might be able to lose it, actually. I'm going to try one thing real quick and see if I can get to work in a certain area. Like, where would it make sense for this to be? Maybe up front, like, maybe it's like a bad idea to stand on this front bumper, or you should just be careful when you do it. So I think that could be kind of cool, actually. So I just need this to be underneath the line drawing because I want that to show through. And I'm just going to darken this up on its own so it feels right. I also have to add to it on the side because I want it to go down the side of this bumper. I just have to make it go in perspective and make these lines follow each other. So this looks like it's painted onto this piece, which is proving to be kind of difficult. There we go. I think that's about as close as it's going to get. And now I just erase it away. So this will look a little rough and hacked together at first, but hopefully when we step back, and now I just need to give it some shadows so it feels like it's part of the scene. I'm just painting on top of it just like I did everything else. It's just like a smaller piece. Yeah, I think that's working okay. Now we need to add the opposite side. I'm going to flip it so the, again, so all the stripes are going in the right direction. Right? Oh, I flipped it the wrong way. There we go. And it also has to be the right density, so I need to make sure they're just as thick as they are on this side, otherwise it's going to feel off. Just cut it away. And just paint those shadows back on again. There you go. Those work out alright. And then I think this last piece I'm going to put maybe on the back, like I think it's dangerous to walk up here or something. Maybe not. I can't see a good place for it. Maybe I'll come back to it, we'll see. Okay, my racing number has got to be on here in a few different places, I think. Like, yeah, you can see it on the front, the side. I think that's about it. I think that's basically just because, so from any angle, you can see what number is coming at you. So I'm going to have a small one up top and a bigger one on the side. So I lower the opacity so I can see the structure underneath, because I'm just following all of the lines on the vehicle to place this. Because these lines are all following that grid that I set down earlier. And that's why I've said so many times in this workshop, you have to get that perspective set at the beginning, and then you just have to like go with it. Even if it's a little off, you've committed to it and you can't change it now. Okay, so obviously that doesn't look like it's on the vehicle right now, so I'm just going to go through my filters and see what options we have. Yeah, nothing good. So I guess what I have to do is keep dropping this down until it gets underneath the shadows for, yeah, there you go, for the bars. And I think I can actually drop it down, yeah, even further into the shadow on the side. The one thing I'm going to do though is now I want that to be lighter than the shadows are allowing it to be, so I'm just erasing away some of the shadows. Not that much. Erasing away some of the shadows so this sticks out a little bit more. There we go. And then we're going to use this other one. And I think up here on top makes the most sense. So again, when you transform, you can just like use these little anchors on the outside of the box and make them follow the perspective. Just trying to make sure that this looks centered and it's sloping down slightly. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I just want it to be slightly darker because it's not really facing the brightest part of the vehicle. I think the next thing I'm going to do is drop all these other logos on there. So I want all of these, I think I want most of them to be black and a few of them to be white, just to like offset things. Like, yeah, I'll put some in the black and some on top of yellow. Let's see. So I need these to just be one color or another, and right now it's white and black. So I'm going to use the wand tool again and cut out everything that I don't need. So you can see there's still some like little remainders of white, and one thing you can do is just pull up levels and make all of the image completely black or completely white. So I've got that now. Same thing here. I'm just going to make them all black to start with, and then I can just invert it pretty simply later once I decide what color I want each of these to be. Does this all make sense what I'm doing? I'm kind of jumping around in between rendering and doing these weird little graphic design choices, so let me know if any of this is confusing. That one I might leave blue, and I might leave the mobile one actually colored still. Maybe these two can be on white backgrounds since they're already kind of like cut in the correct way. Yeah, I think I might do something like that. Those look good together. I just like that blue color, and I feel like that'll be a nice color to add to the rest of the rendering. Okay, so I've got a few decals that can kind of sit on their own, and a few that look good together. Let's look at that car again for reference. So they're all packed together pretty tightly in certain areas. What happened to that pickup truck? Did he have any logos? Let's see where that went. Yeah, he's got a few, but they're all scattered. I don't really like the way that looks. Okay, let's just start applying them and see what we can find. I think the space up here by the number is a good spot for some logos. So I'm actually going to make a stack. That one, maybe not a stack, maybe just this one by itself. Oh, I know what I'll do. These two next to each other. Because this one on the bottom is so wide. You need to make pleasing little compositions with these. So like, you have to think about it like if you were actually putting them on a race car, like the people who own these brands don't want their logos to, look silly. And so the people that design these like paint schemes have an eye for composition to make sure everything looks nice together. So I'm just following the perspective again. Making sure it looks lined up with everything else, and yeah, I think it looks better in white. You can't really tell what those brands are, which is fine. I'm not really doing this to like sell any of these companies' products. I just want it to look good in the illustration. I like those up there. I'm trying to find space on the back. Maybe here on the tail would be a good spot. This one's just very pleasing looking, and it matches the design of the vehicle already because it's got these stripes, which now that I noticed that's probably why I picked it, even though I picked it without really realizing it. Yeah, that's kind of cool looking. I think I'll leave that black. Trying to think if I want to add more. Yeah, let's go ahead and add these. Group them and then drop them down here. And again, it doesn't really matter if you can read it or not. It's just like, does it feel right in the overall composition and like design of the vehicle? That's all I'm really worried about. Yeah, it's getting there. Let's see, what do we do now? I'm gonna hide all this extra stuff because it's distracting. Okay, so that's kind of where we're at. We've got about 20 minutes left, so I'm trying to figure out. I might end a little bit early tonight because I got some things I need to take care of, but let's see. Where will my time be best spent on this? Oh, let's add that light in to the front here. I also want to have it connect with its environment a little bit more than it is right now, so I'm just going to quickly paint in, like if this thing drove into this scene, quick tire tracks. That's a good question, Isaac. I That file is a really old one that I have. If you just type in race car decals, honestly, if you just type in decals, that's a great way to do it. But just like whatever subject you're doing, like if I was designing like a military fighter jet, I would type in like military decals, and you can usually find some pretty good ones from like model kits, because people like people who build models need to find those things, and like other people put them up online for them. Sorry, I'm having a hard time talking and getting this part done. So yeah, just search decals if you're trying to find something specific. So it's a 90. This needs to be a 90. So yeah, that's what I would do. That's usually how I find decals to add. And then you can also, like, if you know of a brand specifically that you're trying to do, I would just like type in that company's name and then like the word logo. So like if you wanted it to be like Apple branded, search Apple logo and find it that way. But pretty simple stuff. The other trick is just to make sure that like the resolution is high enough that you can use it. Because a lot of them will be pretty low resolution, and if you zoom in on any of these, you'll see some issues with them because of that. But because this is just like a little experiment that I'm just like playing around with to show some technique stuff, it doesn't matter so much if they're not perfect. So I just need to smudge these a little bit. Smudge tool is a fun tool to play with. Just kind of roughs things up a little bit. Just don't want to overdo it, which is really easy. I just don't want these shadows to be too distracting, so I'm lightening them up a little bit. The tires feel very unfinished to me. That's bothering me. I think I'll spend my time just trying to clean that up a little bit. See how detailed, see how detailed these tires are? It's just like, there's a lot of visual information happening, so I want to make sure that I'm not missing out on that. Okay, so I'm going to go back to one of those upper levels so I can just paint on top of things. Photoshop is being really wonky right now. Alright, I'm just gonna save it and close it and open it again. Sometimes you just need a restart. Okay, and we're back. Alright, tires. Let's see if I can get something going in the next few minutes. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to end probably around 9:15, so does anybody have any requests for next week? This is week 11, so 12, 13, 14. Got 4 left. I don't know what Western's like plan is for classes, but I enjoy doing these, so if you guys are around to watch it, I will continue doing them. So because of that, I want to make sure that you're getting something out of it, so please just type in now if you have any ideas into the chat box, like what you'd like to see, based on the kind of things you wish you could draw, or the kind of things you've seen me draw before that you want to see more of. Like, let me know. Thoughts? Just going in and hitting these highlights a little bit more. The fenders feel like they're just kind of tacked on casually, and I want them to feel more purposeful. What about you, Isaac? You got any requests for things you'd like to see? Alright, that's starting to feel a little bit better on these. It's just like bothering me how unfinished they looked. As I was talking about before, is like I kind of jumped ahead to get those graphics on there before the rendering was really ready for it. So I'm just going back and seeing all these issues with other things that I didn't get a chance to get to. But these parts really help the illustration stand out, from further away, like, and make it look real and interesting and inviting. Yeah, I do a lot of mech stuff. Yeah, we could do armor. I'm not great with characters, but I've done a little bit before, so yeah, I could try to do some character stuff. That might actually be kind of a fun exercise for me. Maybe we'll do characters next week. Not a bad idea, Megan. Thank you for that. It's going to be a lot of like research, basically, like understanding how things work, why armor looks the way it does. I've been watching a lot of, well, not a lot, but I've been seeing a couple of videos from Warhammer fan art, and Warhammer is like a very old tabletop game that has had like a really long run. It's kind of like a complicated version of Settlers of Catan meets Dungeons and Dragons. But the concept art for it is always really cool, and I've liked it ever since I was a little kid, and the fan art videos on YouTube are like amazing. Isaac's sunglasses are like one of the hardest things to draw because they're so skinny. I don't know, man. That's a tough one. Like even now, like I did a sunglasses project with minimal, and like you really have to practice a lot to get them to look right. Sunglasses are just tough, period. I can give it a shot though, for sure. Just trying to think how I would even start that. I don't know, with stuff like that where it's like it's so important that it's symmetrical, you're kind of like creating the perfect storm of like issues for a designer. Sunglasses are just hard. So yeah, like you said, it's like they're symmetrical, they're skinny. That's the hardest thing. Like bicycles are hard for me to draw for that same reason. Bicycles are hard because there's just like not a lot to them. Like it's a frame and wheel and then that's it. And it looks really crappy sometimes. Yeah, so that helped a lot. Like just cleaning up those wheels and tires. Like I like this a lot more now. Trying to think of last things I would do in this case. So let's see. I'm trying to clean up all my layers here. So that folder has that's the environment, and then this one that says line is actually my rendering. So I'm going to duplicate this and then flatten it. And then I'm just going to play with some adjustments. So like sometimes you can get surprised by like how awesome your color is. So like I just hit auto color, which it makes a small change. Maybe I'll leave it. And then auto contrast. Again, not a big change, but sometimes they will surprise you by making your illustration like just look a little bit more correct color-wise, especially if you're doing something from scratch like this. Let's try playing with the curves. So the curves affect like how much black and white is in an image. It's a little hard to understand. The best thing you can do is just play with it and see if you can find anything you like. I don't know, not really. I'm not seeing anything there. Let's see if there's anything else I want to do. So one thing I do like to do is if you go to filter, this is a good way to make your work just look a little more tight and finished. You go to sharpen, unsharp mask, and you got to zoom in a little bit to see this actually work. But so like you can see all these lines. If I turn off the preview, I wonder if you can see it on your screen. So what do I normally do? Say 150%, radius 1.5 pixels. Okay, that turned it up. Okay, see how much sharper everything gets when I turn that on? So it's with it on and with it off. And it basically just tightens up your whole drawing. So like you can see all these lines got a lot more. So this is underneath. And then I bring that up. And it just makes it look like a little more realistic to me. Like it's got all these hard edges. And the nice thing about this is now that I have those in there, I can go in and I can blur away things that I don't want the viewer to look at. Like this hairy edge up here is really distracting. And so all around the edges of my rendering, I'm just going to blur this. Turn the strength all the way up. And it just smooths out those edges. And all these rough edges just need to be softened in certain places. They're okay in some situations. Like I'm just blurring that one, so this actual part moves back in space. Same thing with down here. Anything that's like not super close to the viewer, this back portion, all these rough edges. Isaac, actually, you know what I think I would do if I was doing sunglasses is get a image off Google and lower the opacity and basically just do an overlay over sunglasses that already exist. but like draw your own design on top of them. Does that make sense? You were there for the overlay class, right? Like I would use overlays if I was doing sunglasses. I think that'll make your life a lot easier. Okay, there we go. I think that is about it. There is my desert racer. Let's save out a JPEG of that. I will post it. I'll also send out a recap from this workshop, and then, at some point next week or next Monday, I will figure out what we're doing. But, to Megan's suggestion, I think there's a good chance we will just do, like character design, and do like some kind of armor situation, like a backpack, some kind of suit of armor, like sci-fi, maybe like some kind of astronaut or something like that. Could be fun. And would be a real challenge for me because that's not something I generally draw. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. For only having a little under 2 hours to do it. I'm just noticing one small thing. Alright, I'm just going to fix this last little part and then I'm going to sign off. Thanks everybody for sticking around. I hope you enjoyed this. And I will talk to you next week.